Welcome to the lecture on the founding of the Roman Republic. Before we begin, make sure you have the fill-in-the-blank notes pulled up. You can find those on my website, or you can get a printed out copy from me in class. The story of Rome begins with the legend of Romulus and Remus. There's about 11 to 12 different versions of this story, but they all agree on a few things. They were twins of the gods, the god Mars, and a Latin princess who was also a priestess. They are abandoned as children. They are found and then raised by a she-wolf. When they grow older, they decide that they're going to build this city. At that point, an argument ensues. Legends disagree on exactly what the argument was about, whether it was who should lead the city or where exactly the city should be located. But all the legends agree that the fight ends when Romulus kills Remus. The story of Romulus and Remus is hugely important to the history of Rome. Some historians will speculate that Romulus and Remus are a version of these divine twins that we see in every corner of global mythology, from ancient Germany to Vedic India to the biblical story of Cain killing Abel. Everyone has this origin story where there are two brothers, they get in an argument, and one brother kills the other. The idea here is that the constant civil war that plagues Rome throughout all of its history, that fratricide, or brother killing brother, Roman killing Roman, was interwoven into their DNA, that it's in our blood, that somehow all of this violence and civil war of Rome was predestined through Romulus's original sin, killing his brother. It was not uncommon for Roman emperors to invoke the story of Romulus and Remus, or to assume the mantle of Romulus when they were fighting these civil wars throughout Roman history. Let's begin talking about the geography of Rome. A lot in the same way that we saw how geography influenced the formation of ancient Greece with the city-states, the mountainous terrain, the proximity to the sea. Similarly, geography has a huge influence on the development of ancient Rome. It's located midway between the Alps and Italy's southern tips, there in the center of Italy. It's at a midpoint in the Mediterranean Sea, which is going to be hugely important for trade later on in Roman history. It's at an area, as we've seen with all of the civilizations we've studied so far, with very fertile soil. It's built on 7 hills along the Tiber River. It was said that Rome had all of the advantages of being close to the sea with none of the disadvantages. Rome was far enough inland where it would be tough for an invading navy to bombard the city, but it was close enough to the sea and along the river where they were very close for those trade routes. There are 3 groups that we're going to talk about that influenced the early Romans. Those are the Latins, the Greeks, and the Etruscans. I'll start with the Latins. The Latins were an Italian people group. They lived on the Italian peninsula. They spoke an early form of Latin, which is where the Romans get their language. Latin is a hugely important language in history. It was the language of the Romans. Latin settlers built villages along the Tiber River. Eventually, these villages are going to unite to form the city-state of Rome. Etruscans were from the northern Italian peninsula. They were also had a huge influence on the early Romans. The Romans got a lot of their ideas in metalworking and in engineering from the Etruscans, as well as their system of writing. They were skilled metalworkers and engineers. Their system of writing, which I'll show you pictures of here in a second, was eventually adapted by the Romans. Under the Etruscans, Rome grew into a large and prosperous city. At that point, Rome was still really a city-state, but eventually we're going to see Rome expand to the entire Italian peninsula and then all of Europe and North Africa. This is an old Etruscan writing tablet. If you look, you should recognize some of those letters. We speak English. English is a romantic language, not in the lovey romantic sense, but in the Roman sense. Romantic languages would include English, Spanish, French, German, any languages that use the alphabets that we use. So you should recognize a lot of those letters. The Romans got their system of writing from the Etruscans. Etruscans were skilled artists as well. Etruscan statues, you'll recognize a lot of these. If you ever get a chance to make it to the Museum of Fine Arts in downtown Houston, they have an amazing Roman section with a lot of these statues in them. Should recognize a lot of the art on these vases. Looks very similar to Greek arts. All the kind of black and red on the vases, very similar to what we saw with the ancient Greeks. Also made statues out of bronze. You can see a couple examples of bronze Etruscan statues here. Lastly, the Greeks were a pretty big influence on the Romans. They settled the Italian peninsula somewhere between 750 and 600 BC. Settled along Italy's southern coast and mainly the island of Sicily that you see circled there off the coast of Italy. The ancient Greece, where we made the map of in class, would be kind of over here. They taught the Romans to grow olives and grapes, contributing to the Roman diet. The Romans' religion is one of the main influence of the Greeks. The Roman religion and the religion of the ancient Greeks are remarkably similar. A lot of the gods, when you describe them, they sound identical. The Romans just have different names for the gods than the Greeks had. Initially, Rome was a monarchy under the Etruscans. They established a monarchy under the Etruscans, and that monarchy, Rome grew from a village into a major city. The monarchy ends with the last king of Rome, Tarquin the Proud. Tarquin the Proud was a very harsh tyrant. He was driven from Rome in about 509 BC by wealthy landowners. Tarquin is credited with murdering a lot of people. Legend has it that he rose to the throne by murdering his brother and also his wife, among others. A lot of people that he's credited with either betraying or murdering. When the landowners finally drive him out of Rome, they declare that they will never again be ruled by a king. That gives us the start of the Republic of Rome, or the Roman Republic. A republic, as you'll recall from class, is a form of government in which voters elect officials to run the states. That should sound familiar. Here in America, we are a republic. There are three groups that I'm going to talk about that governed the republic. Those are the Senate, the magistrates, and then popular assemblies. Let's start with the Senate. The Senate was by far the most influential and powerful group that governed Rome. They controlled public funds and ran foreign policy. The two consuls that I'll talk about later were chosen from the Senate. To be in the Senate, this was a far cry from the direct democracy that we saw in Athens, where everyone was in the assembly or everyone had an equal chance of being in the Council of 500. You had to be a person of status. You had to be wealthy, essentially, to be a senator. Later on, I'll talk about the patricians and the plebeians. You had to be a patrician. You had to be a wealthy person in Rome to be a member of the Senate. In times of emergency, the senators could propose that a citizen be named dictator or absolute ruler for a period of 6 months. This would happen fairly frequently anytime Rome was getting invaded. They would name someone dictator, oftentimes calling a general out of retirement, and give them absolute power over the army and over Rome during the time of war. The idea here was that senators didn't want to be bogged down in debates over strategy and kind of debating what they should do while enemies are at the gates, while Rome is under threat. Oftentimes, the dictators would step down after their time was up or after the threat was gone. The most famous of these would be Cincinnatus, who gets called out of retirement to put down an invasion. He does so and then steps away and goes back in retirement. George Washington was heavily influenced by Cincinnatus when he stepped away from the presidency after only 2 terms. Sometimes, though, as we'll see once we get into the transition to empire, emperors, dictators didn't always give up that power. Magistrates were elected officials that kind of ran the day-to-day operations of the government, oftentimes were appointed by the Senate. Consuls would have been chosen from the Senate. There were always 2 consuls at a time. The idea behind there being 2 of them was they could kind of check each other power, that no one person could become too powerful inside Rome. One consul would lead the army, be in charge of the military, kind of the commander-in-chief, if you will, was supposed to carry out the wishes of the Senate. The other consul would have been in charge of domestic affairs inside the city of Rome and inside the empire. Either consul could veto the act of the other. So again, early form of checks and balances. They're kind of checking each other's power there. Praetors were judges that would have overseen the legal system, carried out trials and whatnot. Censors registered citizens according to wealth or took a census of citizens, if you will. They also could appoint senators. They oversaw the moral conduct of citizens. in a lot of ways were kind of the moral police of Rome. They were very, very powerful.